Hello and welcome back to Starting with IEP. This is episode number 21. If this is your first time here, I'm Flor Amelia, a licensed special education teacher, behavior analyst, and someone who has worked alongside hundreds of families at the very beginning of their early intervention journey. Before we get started, if this podcast has been helpful to you at any point, I really appreciate it if you could follow or subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with another parent who might need it. Those small actions can really help the information reach families who are feeling overwhelmed and don't know what questions to ask yet. Now, today's episode is for parents who are already in the early intervention program, but are quietly wondering to themselves, are we doing this right? If so, why does this progress feel so slow? Or maybe they can be asking themselves, should I be pushing harder? Should I be trusting this process? Now, I want to be very clear about what today is not about. This is not about diagnoses. It is not about adding more services. And this is not about jumping ahead to school-based therapies. Today, we're talking specifically about the first 6 months of early intervention because this phase determines whether early intervention actually works or just feels like another thing added to your schedule. By the end of this episode, you'll understand what professionals are looking for early on. Now, I want to say that early intervention is so important because it gets you used to what advocacy does feel like. Because a lot of the times when families do start the school process, whenever they do start the IEP, they are so lost. So a lot of the times I've noticed that families that start this early education process, they are more than prepared because their feet are already wet. They understand the lingo, they understand the progress, they understand services. So the transition onto the school-based services becomes so much easier, which is why I wanted to take this time to do this episode so families can get more comfortable when they do start services and having those IEP meetings. What we're going to be reviewing is what progress actually looks like in the first few months. And also how to use this time strategically instead of emotionally reacting to it. Now, I know what a lot of you are saying. How can I do that? I'm the parent of this child. Believe me, I know I often go mama bear mode, but at the same time, the more that you understand the process, the clearer it's going to get, which allows you not to react to this emotionally, but more strategically because you do know what to expect. So your emotions don't really have to win certain discussions because you already know what needs to happen, what needs to occur, what needs to be done for your child. So let's get into it. Let's start with the invisible first 30 days and what's really happening. I do want to share that one of the hardest parts of early intervention is the very beginning, the first 30 days. Parents often tell me that it feels like nothing is happening. Ooh, and I do completely understand. I want to say for every service, I'm like, okay, I started these services. How come I'm not seeing progress? Maybe I can call myself an anxious parent because I was like, I waited 2 years to have these services. I kind of picture like a magic wand. Now, again, during that time, it was very emotional for me because I was getting bad news after bad news after bad news. When they ask you those questions about, can your child do X? Can your child do Y? Can your child do Z? So when you finally get into a program, you feel that they're going to be able, finally, they got into this program. Now they can do X, Y, and Z because that's what the service is supposed to be covering. So a lot of the times I completely understand when parents do tell me that it feels like nothing is happening. We finally got services and now it's just observation. Or I thought therapy would look more active. And I do want to normalize that feeling completely happens to a lot of us. A lot of us. And a lot of the times it's because we're coming as parents now. I'm wearing the parent hat right now. Then I do want providers to know that a lot of the times we finally get the services that we've been fighting for our child. And we do have really high expectations, especially if you have providers like your medical providers saying, oh, are they receiving speech, OT? Are they receiving PT? Or, oh, you got them into early intervention. Oh, you got them into the autism program at school. Perfect. Then you would see, oh, I'm doing all the steps. How come we're not seeing progress? So a lot of the times it's because we hear other providers telling us if we do these, then you should be seeing progress. So I do understand why a lot of families, they are feeling this way. And it is completely normal because you have all this amped up, oh, if you do this, then it's going to happen. You're going to get results, right? So I completely do understand. And I want to definitely normalize that feeling because early intervention starts quietly on purpose. So for the first month, professionals are not rushing to teach skills. I want to make sure that you guys understand that we shouldn't be rushing to teach skills because we need to be observing. Providers, now wearing my provider hat on, so I'm so sorry if I say we, and I am talking because I'm also talking as a parent. I do understand, but I'm also seeing in the lens of providers. So the providers, they need to be watching how your child regulates. They need to see how they transition from one activity to the other. They also need to see how your child responds to demands, how they are recovering when they do get dysregulated. So this phase is about collecting baseline behavior data and not intervention outcomes. Now, let me explain why this part is important. So I want to tell you a story when my daughter was receiving preschool services from age 3 to 5 before they head on to kindergarten services. Now, the teacher there told me, oh, your daughter knows her alphabets. We taught her in the IEP during this school year. They wanted to say that they taught Aaliyah that she knows her alphabets and her colors and her numbers. And I remember I was like, actually, before she came to the program, I already knew that my daughter knew how to count to 10. She already knew, this is a really long time ago, but I want to say maybe less than 10 actually letters in the alphabet. So if it was like the first 10 letters, I believe that's A through J, but then they wanted to take the credit in saying, no, that they have taught my daughter from A to O. But remember, A to J, that's 10 letters, K, L, M, N, O, 5. So the whole school year, they taught my daughter 5 letters. Now, if at that time I knew this, if I understood what baseline meant, baseline means where did your child start? So this phase is so critical. So if they don't do the observation, they won't know that your child can say, let's say the vocabulary, 20 different words, right? But in their own observation, if they don't collect enough observation and they didn't see all that, maybe on paper they're going to put, oh, little Johnny can say 5 different words. But you knew that your child can actually do 20. So at that time during this baseline, you can record and then show them like, look, my child can do 20. So that way the goals can be written more appropriately because correct baseline data, accurate baseline data was taken. So again, this phase, the observation part of it is so critical. This phase of baseline will definitely determine the whole outcomes, right? The whole future goals that they're going to be doing. I get so nervous that families don't realize that if they do skip this phase and they want to jump straight into, oh, what goals are we going to do? I get so nervous that the providers are going to build plans that don't match the child. And that leads to frustration shutdown or stalled progress later on. And this is the part where you really do feel like you're just waiting, but you're not behind. You're actually in this data gathering phase. And this phase is the most critical part, and it does matter. So if you get used to this data collection phase, I promise you that you're going to be ready, because then you can ask during those IEP meetings, please tell me the baseline. Tell me the baseline of this goal. Where did my child start? And sadly, sometimes the teams, they don't know the accurate baseline of that child. They just know that that child may need that goal, but they didn't take into account what is the baseline. Remember, because it does matter. If you're telling that the child is going to learn 20 new letters, you need to know what letters they actually do know and not account those as one of the new 20 letters that child is going to be taught. So please know, baseline, write it in your notes. Highly important for your child. Now on to the next part. What progress really looks like on the first 90 days. Let's talk about progress, because this is where expectations often don't really match up with reality. In the first 3 months, progress usually does not look like your child getting new words or perfect compliance, or all of a sudden they have gained independence. Instead, early progress is going to look like shorter meltdowns, faster recovery, and increased tolerance for adult interaction, more willingness to attempt tasks, less avoidance. These are regulation and engagement markers. What I've just mentioned are regulation and engagement markers, and they come before skill acquisition. So you definitely need to perfect those in order to be having a better environment to teach the children how to acquire new skills. What I want parents to understand is that professionals, they look at things such as, can my child stay engaged longer than before? Can they sit in a chair and actually focus on what was on the table? Can they scan appropriately? Can they point? They want to know how much of their attention they can have. And then we have to make sure that the duration can be longer and appropriate, of course, for the child depending on their age and where they are currently at. They also look into, are transition slightly smoother? Are they seeing that transition has improved from one session to the next session? Is frustration escalating more slowly? These changes can be so subtle, but they are definitely so foundational. So I want you to know that if we do ignore them and only look for these big skills, we miss the very early wins and undermine confidence, both yours and your child. So again, definitely setting up that foundation is so critical for the learning environment of your child. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is the most common early intervention mistakes that we do see in the first 6 months. And I say this with compassion. The mistake is chasing more services instead of strengthening the foundation. So when a parent feels anxious, the instinct maybe we need more hours. Maybe we need more of another type of therapy. Maybe we're not doing enough. Maybe I can go here. Maybe I can take my child here. Maybe I have to drive 30 minutes in order to get this type of therapy. But the truth is that early intervention, it really isn't about volume. It is about quality and consistency. When a child is still learning to regulate, tolerate the demands, and trust adults, piling on more services can actually slow down the progress. Sometimes the most expert decision is to stabilize, not to accelerate. What I'm trying to say is doing the right things at the right time. When their child is ready for more services, when they're able to do more. Because sometimes I want to say I have seen schedules, and I actually have been so impressed with a lot of families because I was like, how did you get all of these services to fit in the calendar? Now, as long as it's always play-based and the child doesn't get overwhelmed, for early intervention, it just needs to look play-based. And it also just depends on the providers if they're willing to collaborate. And I think collaboration here is key in order to make it more fruitful, right, for the outcome. But definitely, I don't want you guys to think, oh, because I'm doing all these therapies, you're going to get an outcome that you desire. What I want you guys to focus is, it's the quality of the service. Definitely the quality of the service, and also to make sure that you have a good provider that's working with your child. That is far more important than the amount, the volume of therapies that you have. So hopefully that has helped some of you parents that feel so, I met so many families that they're like, oh, I only have speech and OT. That's all I have. Wow, that's great. Speech and OT is amazing. I'm so happy for that. Now, you can get so much out of just speech and OT because you have amazing providers that you have seen and that you're using throughout the week. Instead of going, let's say you have the 7 different therapies and you're driving 30 minutes there, sitting down, and then driving 30 or 40 minutes more, right, because of traffic. And then you get all this stress. Or you can just have the 2 providers that have done really good collaboration work with the families, so that way you can implement those strategies and interventions throughout the week. So also I want to make sure that with the families, they understand that don't stress yourself out. Please don't stress yourself out. I want to say that. And I am actually mentioning a lot of my mistakes as well. One of the things I want to share with Aaliyah's seizures, hopefully I don't get emotional. Sometimes I get too emotional, but with Aaliyah's seizures, she was always regressing. And I think this is why data for me is so important, because I would notice the days that she would have more seizures, or on the week, we would see regression. And I would be like, she knew this last week. How come she's not getting it before? So I thought we need more therapy, more therapy. But I realized the more that I put on, the more stress. So again, what I'm trying to say, volume is not something that you have to look for, right? What you need to look for is the quality of the service that you're getting, making sure you build that foundational environment that's ideal for your child. Now we're moving on to using the first 6 months to prepare for the future. I want us to zoom out a bit, because early intervention is just not about the now. The first 6 months quietly shape the future conversations, such as eligibility, transition, school readiness, the IEP planning for later on. So what this means that this is the time to keep those therapy notes, track pattern, not just skills. Tracking pattern, I want to stop here just real quickly. I want to make sure that this part is what matters, because once you understand how all this intervention is happening in home, at the house, you're going to know these goals may transition on to the school IEP. So at this time, when they talk about social skills, you're going to be, I have seen my child do X, Y, and Z. My child can do this and that. I've noticed that with my child, when we do this, this occurs. So you're seeing these patterns in your child. You're able to take note of that because that part is actually so important. Let me give you also another example. I remember them reading a storybook to Aaliyah, and Aaliyah would not pay attention unless it is about Disney princess. Now, if there's Disney princess in the storytelling, I've noticed that with these patterns, if the books are about Disney princesses, you would see her attention. That's what I've noticed. I've seen a pattern. They talk about any other books, she could care less about that. So I've noticed a pattern that I'm going to take into these IEP meetings in the future, because then I would know what her interests are when they do certain interventions or goals with her. I want you to make sure that you're tracking these patterns again, not just the skills. Also, during this time, you're going to notice what supports help these regulations. Taking time to document what makes participation easier or harder for your child. This information that you're gathering right now during this early intervention process becomes such a powerful thing later on because you are not planning ahead aggressively. You're not stressing out like, because believe me, that stress is so real. But instead, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be building this clear picture for your child that you yourself are going to be understanding as well. So I do want to say that early intervention is not separate from the school system. Instead, it feeds into it. One of the things that I do want to share is I really wish someone took the time and told me that progress is not linear. But what's most important is that regression does not mean failure. Because I would always freak out when Aaliyah I'm like, but she knew this. She knew this last week. She knew this last week. And I was like freaking out. I was like, now we have to do therapy 3 times. Remember I told you it was like about the volume? No, it's about the quality. So again, regression does not mean failure. And please avoid the whole comparison, because what comparison will do is that it would steal your clarity faster than anything else. One of the hardest things for me is that my daughter had actually 4 cousins that were around her age, a little bit older, a little bit younger. She had female cousins. And I want to say comparison really did cripple me. It really did cripple me, and it didn't do anything good for me. No good for my mental health. If anything, it made me, and I think I explained about this ticking time bomb every birthday. I hated my birthday because right down 2 days later is Aaliyah's birthday. So it was like, oh my goodness, my daughter's supposed to be here. And it's just that she wasn't checking out all those boxes. And I'm like, because our cousins are doing this and my daughter's over here. And I just saw those gaps getting bigger and bigger. So I really wish that someone just told me, don't compare. Do not compare. That's like the worst thing you can do for your mental health, especially if you have other family members that are around your child's age. So please just avoid that. And please know that your role is not to manage therapy. Your role is to observe. I want you to ask questions, many questions. Please stay engaged. That's one of the things that, again, I wish another person did tell me. Because you know how you have this mama manager? I guess you hear them more often, like for a sports manager for their child. I felt like I was that for Aaliyah. Oh, no, she has therapy at this time. Maybe we can build something in between those. No, please do not see yourself as that manager that's managing the different therapies that's going on. Really, your most critical role is to observe, because if you observe, you know your child best, right? You know what your child likes, dislikes. You can definitely there to be asking questions. And the more that you stay engaged, the more that you know what's going on, I'm telling you, you're going to be a stronger advocate when that IEP kicks in. So you are not just the parent, you are part of the intervention process. Once you see yourself more as that, it's going to be so much easier for you to understand that during the IEP, you are part of that IEP team. So yeah, those are the quick things that I wanted to make sure that I did share with you guys. If you guys already are in the early intervention, because that's very important for all the families to know that once they do start this early intervention, it will prepare you for the IEP prepping time. So if you're in the first 6 months of your early intervention, I want to leave you with this. You do not need to have everything figured out. You do not need to push every door open right now. I know you want to. I know you're going to be like trying to pound that door open, because believe me, I know how that feels like, because you're like, my child needs it and I'm the mom and I'm going to go get it. Or I'm the dad. It's my duty to get it. But please know that you do not need to push every door wide open at this time. And also something that please know that you are not behind. Early intervention works best when it's intentional, when it's paced, and when it's grounded in understanding, not just fear. Because I think a lot of the times how I've been driven in the past during this process, I was just so afraid of the unknown. I had so much anxiety about her future. So I really wish someone would have told me that the more grounded I was in the understanding part of it, everything is going to be fine. So if this episode helped reframe what early intervention should feel like, please like this episode, leave a comment, or share with another parent who might be sitting in that same uncertain space. Your engagement does help this episode reach more families who are newly diagnosed and desperately searching for clarity. And if you are a parent who is newly diagnosed or just starting early intervention, I want you to know that I do offer structured courses, coaching specifically designed for families at the very beginning of the journey. These programs are built to help you understand systems, advocate confidently, and avoid the common pitfalls that create years of unnecessary stress. You can find those resources linked on the show notes, and they are designed to support you step by step without feeling overwhelmed. Thank you for being here, and thank you for trusting me in this part of your journey. Next week, we'll continue building on this foundation with another professional perspective. Until then, I'll see you on the next episode of Starting with IEP. Bye.